When it comes to God, the Bible, and understanding, it's okay to not know everything, to have a question mark and leave it a question mark until God himself gives you the answer. Ding! Until the light bulb comes on and you go, oh, I get it now. You understand. It's concealed. It's not revealed. And until God shows it, like show and tell, then you don't make an answer up. You don't decide, well, I think it's going to be this one because it makes sense and all. You wait and keep it a question until God shows you. It's important to wait on God. I love that word wait. We're not going to talk about it, but it's all over the Bible. But I love the sense of waiting on God to give you the answer. I've done that all my life since I became a Christian. And over time, he's given many answers. Not all of them yet. It's kind of like it's like they're on the shelf. Like I put something on the shelf. I have the question here. Here's a question mark like this. And I go, okay, what does this verse mean? I don't just decide what it means. I wait till God shows it to me. So I put that question on the shelf, like invisible shelf. Okay, I put it over here, God, in my mind. I'm going to wait till you answer it. And some answers are not going to happen until we get to heaven. And sometimes prophecies, you know what a prophecy is, young person? It's when a prediction happens. If you remember this, if you haven't seen those, this is a telescope here. Kind of a weird telescope. Ooh, evergreens. We're going to talk about that today. Evergreens. I just realized that. All right. So this is where Jesus said, let me tell you what's going to happen in the future. It's a prediction for the future, and he already sees it before it's happening now. That's what Jesus was doing here in Mark 13. Parallel passages right alongside. It's Matthew 24 and Luke 21. Mark 13 is what we're studying, and now we go to the verse 28. It says, now learn this lesson. The word lesson is really parable there. Parable is something that comes alongside and kind of gives you an understanding. It kind of comes alongside something that's like an invisible thing, and he shows you something visible, like a fig tree in trees, to give you an explanation. It explains something. He says, now learn this lesson from the fig tree. Okay, so do you see these trees right here? There's like different trees in Israel. There's 128 plants in Palestine, in Israel. At least, no, I'm sorry. 128 plants, species of plants mentioned in the Old Testament and New Testament. 128, that's a lot. There's actually 2,384 species of plants in Israel today. In the last century, there's more found out than all the other centuries put together. 2,384. Wow, that's a lot. So all these plants and these things, and he mentions the fig tree. Fig tree is mentioned quite often in Jeremiah and, well, actually throughout the Bible, a lot of times. Some people think that fig tree represents Israel. Not so certain anymore. Not so certain. They believe this passage right here is about Israel. I don't know about that. Just because it's mentioned in various passages in the Old Testament, fig trees are very popular. As a matter of fact, where he's standing on this Mount of Olives, that's famous for the fig trees, Mount of Olives. As a matter of fact, these fig trees can grow up to 20 and 30 feet high. That's a large tree. And there's really, very popular plants like olive trees in that Mount of Olives. There's a lot of olive trees, but especially a lot of figs. So you have olive trees, oak trees, terebinth trees, which is a pistachio tree, which also is 20 to 30 feet. So there's all sorts of plants and trees. Jesus mentions a fig tree here, and it's a particular reason why he did it. I'll tell you real quick about the fig tree. All right, by the way, here's I mentioned evergreens. Evergreens are the most popular. Evergreen is the most popular tree. It's kind of like the evergreen on that Christmas telescope here. The evergreens, I don't know if you can see all these trees here. These are evergreen trees, most of them, are the most popular tree in Israel. And the evergreen stays evergreen. It's green ever. In other words, it doesn't change through summer, through fall, through winter and spring. Fig tree is almost the only one that changes big time. Like all the other trees, you kind of see, the same stuff. fig tree changes. Now, if you can see this one, it's different than all the others. The fig tree doesn't exactly look like this, but we'll just use this since I have this toy here. The fig tree, what happens is the leaves go in the fall time. When winter starts hitting, bye-bye leaves, they all disappear. You've seen trees like that, right? The leaves are gone. Then in the spring, the sap of the tree comes through and it starts sprouting out these leaves. It's covered with leaves. When that happens, and this is what Jesus is saying, summer is right around the corner. It's very near. Now he says, learn this lesson from the fig tree. So he takes something physical, like physical, natural. They know about the fig trees. They're very familiar with it. As a matter of fact, at that time, at Passover, in springtime, this was Passover. He's right about the next couple days. The fig trees right around there, I think he used that on purpose. Jesus was a brilliant teacher. Oh, he was staggering. People were amazed at how he did it. Well, he saw these fig trees and used them as an illustration. It's called a parable. It's a picture of something. So he said, now learn this lesson from the fig tree. Get it? Here's a fig tree. Learn this lesson. Take a look at it and learn a lesson. He says, as soon as its twigs, the leaves come out, get tender, the branches is what he's talking about there. See these branches right here? I don't know if you can see the branches, the branch here. There's brown branches where the leaves come on. Do you see that branch right there? Yeah, so, all right. So as soon as the branches become tender, kind of soften and the sap is coming through here, and its leaves come out, bang, boom, leaves come out, you know that summer is near. Well, what does that have to do with anything? So you're giving us a botany, is that the right word? Botany, a lesson or something of plants. I hope that's the right word. Even so, in the same way, in like manner, he's going to give this picture here, when you see these things happening, these things, quote, quote, these things, that's very important. 4 times, I think it's only 4 times, but 4 times a lot of times in one chapter he says, these things. Well, actually, if you remember verse 4, the disciples, these 4 men, these guys right here, the apostles talking to Jesus here, said, when are these things going to happen? The temple coming down is what they're asking about. When are these things going to happen? Because he said the temple is going to crash. Well, he didn't say it that way, but collapse. He didn't say it that way. He said when the stones are going to be down, not one on top of the other. It's hyperbole there. It's an exaggeration, but everything's going to be crashed down. They ask, when do these things? I think he's answering the questions right here. Between verses 5 and 23, he's answering all these questions. As a matter of fact, it could go all the way up to 27 until this thing. We'll get into that in a second. Now, learn this lesson for the fig tree. As soon as the twigs are tender, the branches are tender, and its leaves come out, you know the summer is near. And they go, yeah, we're aware of that, Jesus. Then he says, even so, in the same way, when you see these things happening, you know that it is near, right at the door. Knock, knock. It's standing at the door ready to knock. What is? I think it's the judgment of Jerusalem. When you see these things, and he mentions all these things in the past, we're not going to go through them until we review. We're almost done with this chapter, a little bit longer. But it's all the false Christ. Of course, that's happened since then. Earthquakes, that's happened since then. A lot of these things have happened, but he's really focused, I think, especially when he talks about the abomination of desolation, particularly verse 14 and on, he really zeroes in on the armies surrounding Jerusalem, which is what Luke said in 21. All these things are happening. The summer is near. So when you see the abomination, you see this, you see all these things happening, it's right there. You need to get out of Dodge. You need to get out of Jerusalem and leave and all that. So he's really warning them. This is actually a beautiful, comforting passage when he talks about this fig tree. How? Because they're going to go through persecution. Do you remember what he mentioned? Hey, they're going to be arrested. They're going to be judged. Some of you are going to die for Jesus. Your brother, sister is going to, your family's going to come against. All men will hate you. All that. Well, persecution, suffering. Then he says, but when these things start really happening, and the increase of them, the intense, when these happen, summer's near. Woohoo! And that's the coming of Jesus. And all he says, even so, when you see these things happening, you know that it is near, right at the door. And the next verse says, I'm not going to go into them because it just plant a little seed here. Ready? I'm going to throw a seed. It says, I tell you the truth. In other words, I'm not fooling around here. This is serious. He says, this generation will not certainly pass away until all these things. See, 4 times he said, the disciples said it. He said, by the way, earlier, if you remember, I've already told you all these things ahead of time. He mentioned that. Then he's talking about these things in this verse 28. And then in verse 29, he mentions these things again. So I think it's all about that time period. Notice he, by the way, says, I'll probably emphasize this if I can remember the next video again. He said, I tell you the truth, this generation will not pass away until all these things have happened. Now, by the way, it says in verse 29, even so when you see these things. So it's talking about them. It's talking about past tense. It's not in the future. See, the question is, this is a big question that I've been discussing. And this is where I have a question mark. My question mark here. Oh, where's my question mark? Where did I put it? Oh, yeah. My question mark here. Do you see the question mark right there? The question is, what is it talking about? Is it talking about past? There's a question mark. Is it talking about future? Are some of these things that have not yet happened? So I wait on God. I'm not sure which it is. Most of it, I believe, is in the past, right here. I'm going to point it upside down, like there, past. However, the question, for example, between those other verses about the heavenly signs, the bodies, the moon and the sun changing, and also the coming of the Son of Man in power and glory, and then the elect are going to be gathered up. There's those few verses that could be future. So I like to kind of put this question mark here, and I'm not going to know until God really shows it to me. And sometimes, like I said in the last video, sometimes God won't allow us to know. He tells us, he did say no, by the way. This part I think they knew, and it was about the judgment. It says, now learn from this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know that summer is near. So he's saying, when you see these things, the judgment of the Jerusalem, it's coming right near. So that part we know. The question is this one part, the signs, not the signs, but this part, the coming of the Son of Man and the gathering of the elect and all that. So verses 5 through 23, I believe in this passage in Mark 13, past. Is it future? Could be. I have a question about that. I'm not sure. And this is a big question right here. This passage, is that for the future? The coming of the Son of Man. Well, I think it's a question mark whether it's past, that he was talking about past. Could be check mark the future. So one could be past, and this part of this could be past. Verses 24 through 27 could be future, hasn't yet happened. But it also could be interpreted as the past, when the coming of the Son of Man is a judgment against Jerusalem, which we already talked about. Just come on and review that again, and keep you aware, and keep reminding you that you don't have to know the answer. And I'm not just going to go eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch it. No. So I wait on God when I have a question. If you have a question in your life about a decision that you have to make, well, you should have no question that you need to make a decision to follow Jesus Christ. There should be no question mark on that. It should be, go for it, exclamation point. But not a whoop, a question mark on that. But there are other questions, such as, what does God want me to do in my life in the future? For example, oh my goodness, you need to wait on God before you marry the wrong person. You need to know from God, I need to hear from God before I'm going to marry this person. Or if you should go to college, and if so, what's the will of God, which college, and then what do you want me to do work-wise, and all that. So a lot of questions in life, but God is the answer for all of them. And there are some things that he's just going to wait on, and you need to wait on God and let him show you. Hope that answered the questions. There's this thing about the fig tree. It's a beautiful parable. Now learn this lesson. And he said, it's these things. So I think, again, it's a past. I think he's telling them that to prepare them. And God wants to prepare you in your life. All you need to do is get close to him, wait on him, and say, what do you want me to do? That's a question. And then God will answer you. God bless you. Thanks for listening.